I am Donna Dubinsky. I am delighted to be here to make a few comments about my friend and colleague, Harry Saul, before I turn it over to the other speakers. I've known Harry a long time. I was trying to think of when it was, back maybe 20 years ago when he was our super #1 Palm fan. I knew him first as a customer and a groupie. And later had the great honor of having Harry be on the board of directors for my current company, Numenta, and its predecessor organization, Redwood Neuroscience Institute. So I'm speaking to you mainly from the perspective of working with Harry as a board member on my company. And I wanted to say two things about Harry in that context. The first thing about Harry as a board member is that he has just incredible breadth in terms of the subject matter. I don't care what we're talking about. We could be talking about the mathematical properties of sparse distributed representations. We could be talking about a problem employee. We could be talking about a complicated license term in a relationship with a big company. Or we could be talking about how to structure our real estate lease going forward. It just doesn't matter what subject it is. Harry always has something thoughtful to say. So I think that the breadth that he brings as a board member is just really, really astonishing. The second characteristic of Harry's as a board member that I want to remark on is his wonderful resilience and patience and support. This company, the Numenta, has been around for 10 years doing really deep research and development work in the next generation of computing and machine intelligence. It's hard stuff. It takes us a long time. We've been in an effort to move towards commercialization, which is moving slowly. If I take those 10 years plus the 3 years before it at the nonprofit Redwood Neuroscience, I mean, it's amazing resilience and patience to stick with it and keep supporting us and keep helping us. And even those days that maybe I'm a little down where I'm like, oh my gosh, is this never going to happen? Harry is one of the places I can turn who is just gives me the support and says, you know, the hard stuff takes a long time, but it's worth doing, and we just have to persist and we have to keep moving it forward. And that support is just enormously valuable. So I don't think you could ask for a better board member and support than Harry Saul. I'm just incredibly grateful to him for the tremendous work that he does with our company. So with those comments, I'd like to turn it over to my husband, Len Shustek, who is going to also speak about Harry.
Thank you. So I feel like I've known Harry forever. In this case, forever is almost 45 years. I first met Harry when I was a graduate student at Stanford. This was the summer of 1971. Harry was a recovering physicist headed toward computer science, and I was a computer science graduate student. And we started collaborating. We wrote some papers together. So that was one of the many roles that Harry has played in my life. Colleague, he's been a co-author. We wrote papers together. He was my thesis advisor briefly before Harry and Carol took off to Israel just in time for the Yom Kippur War. Right? The timing wasn't so great. He's been a mentor. He was co-founder with me of 2 different companies. He was my boss because he was always CEO and I was vice president of engineering. He's been my fishing buddy, right? And during all that time, of course, he's been a wonderful, wonderful friend. And I've learned so many things from Harry. I could go on forever talking about them. Things like how important it is to take risks, to think big, to little things like how do you price products? It has nothing to do, by the way, with what it is that it costs you to make those products. Things like respecting people, not just being focused on the business at hand, but respecting people who are your employees, your customers, and your competitors. And to give back to the community. And I want to give one anecdote about that. We started Network General, which was the second company we did, in May of 1986. And I was heads down doing the product development, and Harry was doing everything else, all the sales and marketing and stuff. By the end of that year, we were 4 employees. We had hired Carol as VP of Marketing. We had hired George Comstock as our VP of Sales. We were 4 employees. December 1986, Harry sits us all down in the room and says, "It's time for us to start our corporate philanthropy program." And I looked at Harry and I said, "You're crazy." And here we are, a company with 4 employees, no venture capital financing. We were financing it ourselves. We have no customers. We have a product that's in development, and you want us to start giving away money. And he said, absolutely. And his plan, described to us, was that that year we would decide to give away $1,000 per employee. There were 4 of us, $4,000. The decision about where to give that money would be based on us, the employees of the corporation, and that we would do that every year of the company, successful or not. That was 1986. If you fast forward to 1995, we were 1,000 employees, and we were giving away $1 million, and we had a very active company committee that was set up to make decisions about where that money should go. That's the kind of culture that Harry promoted in the company and the kind of companies and relationships he built. I want to end by reading something that was written in 1990. I don't know if you remember Hal Kellman. He was a portfolio manager and analyst, and in November of 1990, he wrote an article in Upside talking about Network General and the success we had had. We went public in 1989 when we were 29 employees. That was 3 years after the company was founded, less than 3 years after the company was founded. It was a spectacular success. And Hal says this: you'd think that the unanimously rave reviews for his company's products would bring Dr. Saul his greatest professional satisfaction. But you'd be wrong. When I asked Dr. Saul what he was most proud of, he mentioned his employees. Of the 110 people hired in the last 4 years, 105 are still at the company. That was the kind of Pied Piper that Harry was. In all of the companies that he's been associated with, people want to work with him because of his values. And it's been my great pleasure to have been your friend, Harry, for 45 years, and you deeply deserve this reward today. So thank you for that. I want to bring up now a very successful entrepreneur, but more importantly, a longtime friend of Harry and a fellow fisherman, Mark Leslie.
So I was asked to speak about it, Harry, the person, not the businessman or the philanthropist. So I've counted Harry as a friend for about 10 years. However, I do not know very much about his very, very dark past before then. I have heard some rumors, though. Harry is a warm and happy person. He's a teddy bear. He always has a smile and an easygoing laugh. He is actually just a pleasure to be around. Let me share some of the many dimensions of Harry Saul. So first, Harry is the lovable geek. In 2011, Harry was kind enough to invite me on the Alaska fishing trip that he so graciously organizes that Len just mentioned a moment ago. I had never been on one and had no idea what to expect, but I was certainly game to try. After fishing that first day and a great dinner of the freshest salmon I had ever tasted, the 6 of us, including Len, gathered for the evening. I was up for a total macho guy evening, drink scotch, play poker, smoke cigars, and tell manly stories. I was last to join, and when I got there, to my surprise, I found them all sitting there with their laptops open. They were actually debugging the Wi-Fi repeater that brings the signal from the main house to the lodge. Well, when you travel with a bunch of geeks from Silicon Valley, you get what you pay for, but I can say as a fellow traveler, being a geek myself, I was just fine with this. The next night was pure Harry. He appeared from stage left as the sushi meister. Hidden in his luggage and unbeknownst to the rest of us was his sushi knife, traditional Japanese sushi robe and headband, and soy sauce, pickled ginger, and wasabi condiments. Incorporating the traditional Japanese shouts, grunts, and motions, he prepared a feast for us, for which we were all very grateful. Harry and games. Harry has been an enthusiastic gamer for as long as we can all remember. Harry and Carol joined us this past December in Maui, and for the first few days, I thought he was deeply engaged in some important business deal, as he was doing email all day long. I would later found out that he was actually playing games. I had prepared the way for Harry by having Wi-Fi and a Wi-Fi repeater that were working correctly, so we did not have to diagnose and debug them when we got there. Harry and Nate and Susan. Nate grew up with Harry as a gamer. Nate recalls playing Dungeons and Dragons in ASCII format. For those of you who are not technically blessed, ASCII means that there were no pictures, and they were entering and receiving text to play the game. We would think of this today as desperate people doing desperate things. Harry wasn't all games, of course. When it was time to play the all-American game of father and son catch, Carol was the father. Papa Harry and Jared and Dahlia. These days, Harry's greatest mission in life is to be the grandfather to Jared and Dahlia. To quote him, the real reason for having children is to have grandchildren. Nate and Susan, I guess you now know your place. Since the onset of grandparenthood, he has found a new enthusiastic video game partner in Jared. Dahlia is still a bit too young, but she is watching and planning and plotting and waiting for her day. Like most kids these days, they have strict limits on screen time, but when they're at Nana and Papa's house, all bets are off. And when Harry loses to Jared, which is the most common event, he can be heard boasting, "I got beat, I got beat." He's one of those grandpas who always comes to the kids' events, school presentations, celebrations, recitals, soccer, baseball, judo, and everything else you can think of. He has always been a huge supporter of their Jewish education, just as he was for Nate and Jessica, who also attended the Jewish day school. And he's always ready to babysit, even without Carol. Harry as a mathematician. As a mathematician, he will often throw out some pop quizzes to the grandchildren to develop their mathematical acuity on the fly, something I do also, actually. And speaking of math, and since Harry and I are both quants, I thought I would try to quantify how much better Harry was than me at being a grandfather. I gave this a lot of thought. What better way than to quantify the real hardcore heavy lifting of grandparenthood than diaper changing? I calculate that my 6 grandchildren use an average of 6 diapers a day for an average of 3 years. Of those 39,420 diapers, I changed 2. Now, Harry has 2 grandchildren, so his total diaper opportunity was 13,140. Carol estimates that he changed maybe 4 or 5. So adjusting for the difference in the total number of diaper changing opportunities, it turns out that Harry was about 7 times more effective than me in grandparenthood. Now, before we get all excited over here, I have to say that I'm not sure of the accuracy of these numbers, because after I got them from Carol, she said, I may have exaggerated a little bit. Harry and Carol are truly devoted to one another. On our many social outings, you can feel their long-term love and companionship and devotion. Harry was tested and showed his true colors during Carol's battles with mantle cell lymphoma a few years ago. He was by her side at every turn for the years of treatment and the later stage testing. He was her science consultant on all forms of treatment. He was her voice to the community, writing email updates and taking questions. And perhaps more than anything else, he was her loving and tender companion at a time of great vulnerability. Deborah and I couldn't wish for better friends than Harry and Carol. Jared and Dahlia couldn't wish for a better papa. Nate and Susan couldn't wish for a better father and father-in-law. And certainly Carol couldn't wish for a better husband. Thank you.